Welcome back to the channel, fight fans. Today, we're diving into the top 10 most watched UFC fights of all time. These battles not only broke records, but also shaped the history of MMA, from unforgettable knockouts to shocking upsets. These fights brought millions of fans to the edge of their seats. Let's get started. 10. Chuck Liddell vs. Tito Ortiz 2, UFC 66. At number 10, we have one of the most iconic rivalries in UFC history. Chuck the Iceman Liddell vs. Tito Ortiz. Their first fight at UFC 47 ended with Liddell knocking Ortiz out cold, but the rematch at UFC 66 was even bigger. This event marked the UFC's 100th pay-per-view card and helped establish the promotion as a global powerhouse. Liddell came into the fight looking to defend his light heavyweight title, while Ortiz aimed to reclaim his legacy. After 2 competitive rounds, Liddell landed a devastating right hook that sent Ortiz crashing to the canvas. The knockout sealed Liddell's status as one of the greatest fighters of all time and solidified this fight as a classic. With 900,000 PPV buys, it remains one of the most important fights in UFC history. 9. Jon Jones vs. Daniel Cormier, UFC 178. Coming in at number 9, we've got the clash of two giants, Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. This fight was billed as a battle between two of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Jones entered the octagon as the reigning champion, while Cormier was undefeated and determined to prove himself. From the opening bell, Jones dominated with his unorthodox striking and grappling. Cormier tried to press forward, but Jones' reach advantage and technical brilliance were too much to overcome. The fight ended in a unanimous decision for Jones, but the rivalry didn't stop there. This bout set the stage for one of the most intense feuds in UFC history, with multiple rematches to follow. With 900,000 PPV buys, this fight marked the beginning of a new era in the light heavyweight division. Anderson Silva vs. Chael Sonnen, UFC 117, at number 8. We have one of the most dramatic fights ever. Anderson Silva vs. Chael Sonnen. Leading up to the fight, Sonnen relentlessly trash-talked Silva, calling him out at every opportunity. Inside the octagon, Sonnen backed up his words by dominating Silva for 4 rounds, landing punch after punch and taking Silva down at will. But in the final minutes of the 5th round, Silva pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in MMA history. He locked in a triangle choke from the bottom position, forcing Sonnen to tap out. The crowd erupted, and Silva retained his middleweight title. This fight showcased Silva's incredible heart and resilience, cementing his legacy as one of the greatest fighters of all time. With 1 million PPV buys, it became a defining moment in UFC history. 7. Georges St. Pierre vs. Matt Hughes 3, UFC 65. Number 7 takes us back to UFC 65, where Georges St. Pierre reclaimed the welterweight title from Matt Hughes. Their rivalry began at UFC 50, where Hughes defeated St. Pierre via armbar. In their second fight, St. Pierre avenged his loss with a decisive win, setting up the trilogy bout at UFC 60. This time, St. Pierre left no doubt. He knocked Hughes out cold with a vicious head kick in the second round, marking the beginning of his legendary reign as champion. GSP would go on to become one of the most dominant fighters in UFC history, and this fight was the turning point. With 1 million PPV buys, it remains a pivotal moment in the sport. 6. Ronda Rousey vs. Holly Holm, UFC 1093. At number 6, the biggest upset in women's MMA history, Ronda Rousey vs. Holly Holm. Rousey entered the fight as the undisputed queen of the UFC, boasting an undefeated record and a string of dominant performances. Holm, a former boxing champion, was seen as a massive underdog. But Holm had a game plan, and she executed it perfectly. She used her footwork and striking to keep Rousey at bay, frustrating the champion throughout the fight. In the second round, Holm landed a picture-perfect head kick that sent Rousey crashing to the canvas. The knockout shocked the world and ended Rousey's reign. With 1.1 million PPV buys and a record-breaking live audience of over 56,000 fans, this fight will always be remembered as one of the greatest upsets in sports history. 5. Conor McGregor vs. Nate Diaz, UFC 196. Number 5 brings us one of the biggest surprises in UFC. History. Conor McGregor vs. Nate Diaz. McGregor, the charismatic featherweight champion, moved up to weight classes to challenge Rafael dos Anjos for the lightweight title. When dos Anjos was forced to withdraw due to injury, Nate Diaz stepped in on short notice. What followed was a wild back-and-forth battle. McGregor started strong, dropping Diaz early, but Diaz weathered the storm and took control in the later rounds. In the second round, Diaz locked in a rear-naked choke, forcing McGregor to tap out. It was the first loss of McGregor's UFC career and a shocking upset that sent shockwaves through the MMA world. With 1.5 million PPV buys, this fight set the stage for one of the greatest rivalries in UFC history. #4. Brock Lesnar vs. Frank Mir 2. UFC 100. At number 4. The historic UFC 100 main event. Brock Lesnar vs. Frank Mir. Their first fight at UFC 81 ended in controversy when Mir submitted Lesnar with a kneebar, capitalizing on Lesnar's inexperience. By the time they met again at UFC 100, Lesnar had evolved into a dominant force, winning the heavyweight title in his next fight. In the rematch, Lesnar sought revenge and he got it. He brutalized Mir with heavy punches and elbows, finishing the fight with ground and pound in the second round. The victory solidified Lesnar's status as one of the most dominant heavyweights in UFC history. With 1.6 million PPV buys, this fight became a celebration of everything the UFC had achieved by its 100th event. #3. Conor McGregor vs. Floyd Mayweather Jr. The money fight. Number 3 takes us outside the octagon for the biggest crossover fight in combat sports. History. Conor McGregor vs. Floyd Mayweather. While not officially a UFC event, this bout shattered records with 4.3 million PPV buys, making it the highest-grossing combat sports event of all time. McGregor, the brash MMA star, stepped into the boxing ring to face Mayweather, widely regarded as the greatest boxer of his generation. Despite being a heavy underdog, McGregor put up a valiant effort, even winning the early rounds. However, Mayweather's experience and precision proved too much, and he stopped McGregor in the 10th round. While Mayweather won, McGregor earned widespread respect for his performance and brought global attention to the UFC. Number 2. Conor McGregor vs. Nate Diaz 2. UFC 202. At number 2. We have the rematch everyone was waiting for. Conor McGregor vs. Nate Diaz 2. After losing to Diaz earlier in the year, McGregor was determined to settle the score. The fight took place at UFC 202 in Las Vegas, with both men exchanging verbal jabs during the build-up. What followed was one of the most competitive fights in UFC history. Both fighters pushed each other to their limits, trading blows for 5 grueling rounds. In the end, McGregor edged out a majority decision, avenging his earlier loss. The fight showcased McGregor's resilience and fighting spirit, further cementing his status as a global superstar. With 1.65 million PPV buys, this fight remains one of the most watched in UFC history. #1. Conor McGregor vs. Khabib Nurmagomedov, UFC 229. And finally, at number 1, we have the most watched UFC fight of all time. Conor McGregor vs. Khabib Nurmagomedov. This fight was years in the making. With both men exchanging insults and building one of the most intense rivalries in MMA history, McGregor, the brash Irishman, returned to the octagon after a 2-year absence to challenge Khabib, the undefeated lightweight champion. The fight itself was a masterclass from Khabib. He controlled McGregor with his wrestling and grappling, eventually submitting him with a rear-naked choke in the 4th round. But the drama didn't end there. After the fight, chaos erupted as Khabib leaped out of the cage and attacked McGregor's cornerman, sparking a brawl that made headlines worldwide. With a record-breaking 2.4 million PPV buys, this event was an unforgettable night in UFC history. So there you have it, the top 10 most watched UFC fights ever. From epic knockouts to shocking upsets, these battles defined the sport and captivated millions of fans around the world. Which fight is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic MMA content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, fight fans.